There's a famous saying that there's no such thing as an anti-war movie, that regardless of how much the messaging of the movie opposes war, you can't tell the audience not to do this cool thing. Well, here's another related idea that I would like to propose, is that while there is such a thing, a lot of people fail at making an anti-fascist story. Which is silly because, unlike war, fascism is much easier to show as a disgusting idea it is. There are entire stories, don't get me wrong, dedicated to shitting on fascism that do it wonderfully. And yet for every good anti-fascist story, there are a dozen others that accidentally end up glamorizing it. Like, what the fuck, guys? Hello everyone, this is Meme, about to show you the complex relationship Attack on Titan has with fascism. Buckle the fuck up and please keep it civil in the comments. And I'd also prefer you to keep any toxicity, if it does occur, within the comments section here. So, yeah, here's a video. Okay, so to put it short, Attack on Titan is a story that tries to steelman genocide. If you don't know what steelmanning is, it's the opposite of strawmanning. There's just one problem with this. Genocide is such a cartoonishly evil concept to begin with that steelmanning genocide is bad. Yet Attack on Titan does it anyway and hence fails as a critique of genocide. There are so many other stories that have attempted to humanize genocidal people without making them sympathetic. It's possible, and it has been done multiple times before. Attack on Titan fails at this horrendously. After reading the story of Attack on Titan, I didn't side with the Alliance or become a Jaegerist. I reached out of the fourth wall and asked why Isayama thought it was a good idea to make genocide seem more reasonable than it is in reality. It's like trying to plaster an anti-racism and anti-slavery message over a minstrel show about black people having it good under the Confederacy. I think that should put into perspective what I'm getting at here. Genocide is bad, and the story outwardly claims to be against it, but the internal logic of the show consistently shows that Eren's actions are the only way. Again, I say that is some very sus writing, especially from a guy from Japan, a country with a not that great relation with the past. So before we start to talk about the details, I want to preface this with the article that first brought up the connection between Attack on Titan and fascism. It's a poorly written article and was rightly clowned upon by the entire Attack on Titan community. Shoddy evidence, mental gymnastics, and the inability to differentiate between depicting and endorsing. The reasons it claims Attack on Titan is fascist is laughable, and the article as a whole even more so. Yet I can't help but feel that, though the article is wrong in almost every way, there's one way it is not. The conclusion. Nowadays, there's a large contingent of people who look back at the more problematic elements of Attack on Titan and look into it. Because call them out for a lack of media literacy all you like, the Attack on Titan fanbase does have many fascists. It's the same problem with communities such as the Warhammer 40k series, a series which I am a fan of, where the line between depiction and endorsement is blurry, but at least 40k has the advantage of being fairly ridiculous and over the top. Attack on Titan is pretty gritty and serious, and doesn't have this effect. So before we begin, I'll break down what fascism specifically means and the various ideologies that inhabit it. So what is fascism? Fascism is a far-right, ultranationalist, and authoritarian ideology. The reason I say this is because I feel like we have to dissect fascism before we actually start talking about it. Because while I feel that there is some fascist elements to the story, it also refutes fascism in a lot of ways. Attack on Titan's relationship to fascism is complicated, and where depiction ends and unintentional endorsement begins is fuzzy, but there are some elements of fascism that Attack on Titan definitely rejects. So firstly, Attack on Titan is a very anti-authoritarian story. I'm not going to talk about the plight of the Scouts and the Wings of Freedom. Many fascist authoritarian states can and often do portray their struggles against the former regime as a struggle for freedom. One can even describe fascism as revolutionary conservatism. No, I'm not talking about the Jaegerists. The Jaegerists are portrayed as evil, vindictive, and petty at every turn of the way, as they should be. Figures such as Hanji, Armin, and Mikasa, who oppose the authoritarian state that Paradis Island becomes lionized, while figures like Floch, who are part of the new authoritarian establishment, are villainized. So that's one element in which Attack on Titan definitively refutes fascism. Marley, another authoritarian state, is frequently depicted as evil, and I am pretty confident in saying that Attack on Titan overall is a pretty anti-authoritarian story. So in that regard, Attack on Titan is indeed anti-fascist. In themes, in characterization, in plot, and world building, Attack on Titan rejects authoritarianism. Think about it, pretty much every authoritarian in Attack on Titan is presented as evil. Racism, while not an essential component of fascism, tends to be omnipresent in fascist societies, and this idea of unequal races has been refuted in the story multiple times. So at the very least, it condones overt fascism. And genocide, again, not a critical requirement of fascism, but something fascist societies are fond of committing, is, at least on a plot basis, refused by the story. I'm not going to go out of my way to say that Attack on Titan is a 100% God-to-honest fascist story. That would just be ignoring the facts. And with all that out of the way, let us look at the ways Attack on Titan does accidentally support fascism. According to the wise words of a friend of mine, the worst part about the world building of Attack on Titan is that in Attack on Titan, the Eldians aren't discriminated against just because of their powers, but because they used to be the ultimate oppressors. Attack on Titan constructs a world that is run on fascist logic, and yet tries to oppose it in its themes and characterization. That is the reason for the dissonance between the characterizations and themes versus the plot and world building. Some guy on Reddit even came up with this really interesting analogy. Imagine if the Nazis actually managed to create a super soldier formula that turns all their people into Hulks that could be controlled by Hitler and his descendants, and contaminated all the German population with that. Even if the Allies won, the German people would never be treated the same until the world finds a cure, if we find it. Now imagine if the Nazis not only won the war, but ruled the world for 1,000 years, just as they planned before finally falling and turning into a rump state in Madagascar. This is Eldia, or at least it was before the king erased the people's memories. It reeks of the white genocide conspiracy theory, where it states that white people are being genocided by Jewish people. There's also the seemingly schizophrenic way racism is portrayed in Attack on Titan. For example, let's say that there's this guy who has worked against racism his entire life. He has campaigned against racism, constantly tried to outreach to minorities, and all of a sudden, when you're talking about the Confederate States of America, he pulls out the good old, well, some slave masters weren't so bad, and think about how the whites brought civilization to the slaves. What is this mixed message? This might seem a little alien to a Westerner, but I think we have to start to acknowledge that, hypothetically, say, a Holocaust denier doesn't necessarily need to be anti-Semitic. A Lost Cause of the Confederacy believer doesn't need to hate black people. Imagine a story that goes, actually the Jews were trying to destroy Germany, but murdering them is still wrong on a moral level, I guess. Also, the Wehrmacht were totally the good guys. It was the SS that was evil. Because this is literally what's going on in Asia right now. On a somewhat tangential note, am I the only one that thinks that the Marleyans are also somewhat portrayed as subhuman? They don't achieve anything of their own volition. They don't have an identity beyond hating Eldia. They don't even free their own nation. It's the work of other Eldians. Yes, we get Magath, who is portrayed as an evil guy before becoming good? But still, this is the equivalent of a racist who says they can't be racist because they have one black friend. Isayama, dude. And inversely, the Eldians are portrayed as the Ubermensch. Sure, you have shitty people like Fritz, but dude, come on, man. If Magath is the racist guy's one black friend, then this is the inversion of that conquest. Isayama's going, well, alright, the Eldian Empire actually isn't perfect, guys. Here's one time they were evil, and he shows us an event from, 2,000 fucking years ago. We never see the actually relevant crimes from, say, just a century ago. Any of the more recent actions of the Eldian Empire that might make the viewer sour a bit towards, the Eldian Empire. We just see a barely relevant 2,000 years. Is this even a war crime since it's 2,000 years ago? This is just how things were back then. This just reeks of genocide apologism, even as the story technically says, racism bad, guys. Honestly, it goes both ways, too. The Eldians can be the Nazis and the Marleyans, the oppressed people under the Nazis in the past, and the Eldians, the Jews, and the Marleyans, the Nazis in the modern era. In this case, it's still problematic. Eldians actually are biologically different from other people. Also, the fact that the Eldians, who are very obviously made to represent post-war Japan, are portrayed as Jewish people from the Holocaust camps, it tells you everything you need to know. Yeah, that's right. It's clear that Parody is Japan while Marley is China. Which, yeah, fair. China is imperialistic and evil in on itself, but having the Japan parallel, not analog, the Japan analog is Hizuru, be the poor oppressed people who did nothing wrong and their past crimes are irrelevant really rubs me the wrong way. It's also disingenuous to imply that China calling Japan out, the one thing they're right on, I'd say, is equivalent to Marleyan oppression of Eldians. And let's not forget Korea, a country that isn't being imperialistic at all, gets equally shit on in a way. If I'm going to go on a leap of logic here, maybe the mainland Eldian represent the Koreans? This is more of a stretch than Marley being China, but I digress. Yes, Eldia is both the Jews in Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan under attack by America, and modern Japan being quote-unquote cucked by its constitution before the Jaegerists even come into play. Gee, I wonder how that's totally not problematic. And of course, that's not even including the information that people like Erwin and Pixis, two highly respectable individuals in the show, are based off of literal war criminals. Erwin is based off of Nazi Germany's legend Erwin Rommel, and Pixis is based off of Akiyama Yoshifuru, another war criminal, this time who served the Japanese Empire. Hajime Isayama has quite literally admitted to that, and yes, that tweet is him. It is him. Now, to be fair, to give Isayama the benefit of the doubt, Akiyama Yoshifuru was known to be one of the more moderate generals in war, much like how Erwin Rommel is commonly thought of as a more quote-unquote clean German general. But I hope you and I both know that the clean Wehrmacht myth is, well, just that, a myth, and the Imperial Japanese Army is no different. However, as the point stands, it possibly could have been a point of ignorance, so I'll give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt there. I mean, from what I gather, Isayama isn't some ultra-fanatic right-wing lunatic. Just look at his portrayal of Floch. He's a skeptic who asks, was the Japanese Empire really that bad? Yes, it was. In short, Attack on Titan is not purely anti-fascist. It has pretenses to anti-fascism and rejects many core tenets of fascism, but isn't itself anti-fascist in its entirety. Its central narrative is that the stab-in-the-back myth is true. It depicts an island nation being unfairly maligned by the nations of the world, despite the fact that they killed everyone about a century ago. The world building is basically straight up a neo-fascist fantasy that makes genocide of former colonies look reasonable. And people are curious why fascists like a story where Aryan Germans are placed into concentration camps by resentful, formerly oppressed peoples. There's a difference between representation and endorsement, and to be frank, I don't think Attack on Titan fully leaves endorsement. Yes, what I'm saying is Attack on Titan isn't anti-fascist enough in all areas. Making a dig for the 100th time doesn't change anything. We get it, authoritarianism bad, and we're glad you reject that element of fascism. Now, can you reject justifications for colonialism and explain to us how fascism isn't just evil but also illogical? Because in this latter element, it fails painfully. Floch isn't presented as a madman, well no, he is, but he's also portrayed as being correct. The soft-hearted anti-rumbling scouts are portrayed as the good guys but illogical, whereas the Jaegerists may be evil and mean but are presented as logically correct. Instead of, the frothing idiots at the mouth that real-life fascists are. The story writes itself into a corner due to the shitty world building, where genocide is the only logical solution to the problem at hand. I've even heard one person say that Attack on Titan is so far removed from reality that it ends up echoing pro-genocide rhetoric, even unintentionally. Because in real life, genocide is not nuanced. Humans committing genocide upon other humans is bad. Killing innocent people by the millions is bad. There should be no nuance. There is no, this character deserves to commit a little genocide as a treat. There's no, but it's about his freedom. There's no, but they're also bad. If it's nuanced, that in itself is bad, because you have to ask yourself, why did the author, who, mind you, comes from Japan, a country with serious problems, shoving atrocities under the rug, make genocide nuanced? Don't get me wrong, Attack on Titan does reject authoritarianism. It also, on a surface level, rejects racism. Even if it's done in such a compromising manner, it ends up making racists look a lot more level-headed than they are in real life. But then again, that doesn't stop the inherent world building in Attack on Titan from being what it is, which makes what should be shockingly sad moments like these fall flat. Okay, that's the third video on this channel, officially. As for my next video, I'm probably continuing with Tropes Animated. I'm making a video about Dandiri girls, after the incredibly dark and depressing topic of Attack on Titan and fascism. I figure we need some Dandiri wholesomeness to cheer everything up. So yeah, that's gonna be my next video. I'm pretty sure Toonie has his video in production as well, so that's gonna be dropping sometime soon. But yeah, that's all there is for that. Please subscribe to this channel as well as my personal one. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and this is Meme out.